Greetings. Just rooting through the scrap of cordage here in this little bag. I'm a bit of a cordage hoarder. You just never know when you're going to need to save something. Like this was from an old canopy, found this on the trail. Just thought, what the heck, a perfectly good piece of paracord. Why leave it out there in the nature? You know, old straps from things, you never know. I could use those for my homemade sandals. But I do use cordage quite a bit in camp, and I think it's time to take a quick look at a few of the knots I use to get through camp life. One of the knots I use fairly commonly is loop in a line. How do you put a loop in a line? Well, it's very simple. You're just going to double your cord over onto itself, and then take that as if it is its own cord and just simply tie it into a knot and leave a tail sticking out, and that little tail sticking out becomes your loop. And whatever you hang from there, that's not going to come undone. You could hang, hundreds of pounds or whatever the capacity of the rope is, it should not break. And this comes in really handy for those of us who are into backpacking, because you can put this loop anywhere in the line. It doesn't have to have this little tail. That could be extending off 50 feet in any direction you want. And we can't always find a bear hang when we're backpacking that is suitable. Sometimes the branch that you choose is just too close to the tree. So, a bear could easily reach out and grab your food and, swat it over and grab it. But what it can't do is climb across a little thin rope like this. So somewhere in the middle of your rope, you can just double it up and tie a knot in it. And again, that knot's going to stay. But now you have a knot that you can move side to side in between two trees. If you can find a couple trees that are, the right distance apart, you can put this out in open space with, 25 or 30 feet of open air in either direction, where there's no way even the longest legged bear couldn't possibly reach it. And that makes it a wonderful way to hang your food. You just put a rope through that loop for your bear hang, and away you go. Pretty handy to know. Loop in a line. And loop in a line actually is the foundation and the cornerstone of one of my favorite ways to tie things down. And I'll show you that next. Okay, so my favorite way to tie things down or cinch things down is an old school method called trucker's hitch. And you probably see here what I've got is loop in a line right here. Very simple thing to do. And it cinches down to an eye that I've got driven into the ground so it can move like that. But then what you're going to do is take this free end and use a little bit of leverage. What you've got here in the eye that's driven into the ground is called a pulley, essentially. And this is now a pulley, essentially. So now you've got division of work. And you can go ahead and just pull it right down and get that just about drum tight. That is very, very tight, as you can see. And all it takes to cinch it down is literally 1/2 hitch. I use 3 half hitches, which is another cinch down or tie down method. But this first hitch, that little loop there, will hold, and it'll hold it. And it'll be so tight that you just about need a pair of pliers to get it undone. But you'll do a second one to make your second half hitch, cinch it down, and one more, and that is your third half hitch. So 3 half hitches, and you're good to go. And that is tight as a drum. And quite frankly, I had to get a pair of pliers to undo this from the very first hitch. Was so tight when I undid this just to demonstrate here. And that was just under tension. So under transit, the 3 is definitely going to help you make sure you got backup so it's not going to come undone. And you can always take this and, maybe tie it on here or something to make sure it's not going to go flopping away or anything like that. Or to keep it off the ground so that bugs don't go crawling up it. That's another thing you can do. But trucker's hitch, old school, been using it for years, works great, gives you plenty of leverage. You can get it as tight as you want, and you don't have to worry about it slipping or coming undone. And it'll stay like that until you either take a pair of pliers to undo the knot or cut the cord yourself, basically. But there you go. Loop in a line leads to trucker's hitch. Really great way to tie things down. Now, one of the other 2 ways that you might need to use rope is making 2 pieces of rope a longer piece. So how do you combine 2? Well, unless you have mad splicing skills and can make this a perfect continuous piece where there's no bump at all, you're going to have to tie them together. And that's as simple as your classic granny knot, where you just twist that around. And then you're going to do the sort of opposite knot. Instead of going forward like that one, this one's going to go, get off me fly, around to the back. So now you see there's essentially 2 loops. This line here, you can see, forms around a loop, and this line here is a little loop of its own, and they're going to cinch onto each other, and those are not going to come apart no matter what you do. Those are not going anywhere. And so that's a really handy way to put them together. Another way is, you may have seen it in like adjustable necklaces, where you're going to take, for example, this one, and we're going to tie a little knot so it's tied around this one, but then this one we're going to take and tie to the opposite one the same way, with just a simple little knot. Whoops. And now we have, as you can see, the two knots can slide towards each other, or they can slide away from each other. And if this was like the string of a necklace, you could make it shorter or longer depending on how you wanted. I've seen friendship necklaces and bead necklaces like this. But when those two come together, they cinch onto each other, and that is not coming apart. And it's got a few more twists in it than the other method I showed you, where you're sort of looping the two around each other. And that's, again, that's not coming out of there at all. And if you want to, you can grab onto it. Ooh, yeah, they're really cinched on there. And you can undo. And this can also work to cinch around something. You could put something in there, and as these pull together, it'll cinch onto it, whatever that might be. So you could maybe, if there was like a jar with a lip, a big lip, you could put that around there and carry the jar by it, or a jug or something, or put a loop through there. That's definitely not going to come out. But being able to combine two ropes or two strings is very, very important. And there's two quick, down and dirty, and easy and simple methods to do that. And if you don't want to mess around with the trucker's hitch and doing all that stuff with cinching down, you could always tie the rope right onto the end of the stake, and hammer it in tight, but you'd have to be able to attach it on somehow. And that's where our good old loop in a line can actually come in to save us. But we're going to need a big enough loop to be able to pass the whole thing through, so let's turn this whole big thing into a loop by running it through its own self. And so now we have a big old giant loop, and you can probably imagine the method. It's pretty simple. Whoops. If I can get my cold hands to work. We're just going to literally pass the string through its own loop, and on we go. And that's definitely not going to come off. The only drawback would be that the individual lines can move, as you can see there probably, and obviously it can move around a bit, but I guess any tie would be able to. But that's not even a knot that can slip off. The main knot that you would have to worry about is up here, and that's definitely not going to come undone. Looping a line, that big knot onto itself usually just doesn't come undone. The more you pull on it, the tighter it gets. And so that's a really handy way to do that. Now I have to untie and look at maybe a second way. It's not the way I do it, because I kind of do things a little more down and dirty, a little simpler. But fishermen might know this one. See if we can get it to work. It's a little tricky. Now, this has to go through that loop up front. I don't know if it'll cooperate. And then back through the back loop. And it should cinch down onto itself like that. I guess that's a rudimentary version of the fisherman's knot. I've done better for sure with fishing line. This isn't exactly a fishing line, but the whole point is that as you cinch down, it cinches onto itself and gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And that's the whole point of it being good for attaching to the eye of a fishing hook, is that as the fish is fighting, all it's doing is cinching the knot tighter. But it doesn't rely on tension to hold, which is nice, because you don't want to have to worry about something flopping around and having the loop come completely undone, and then you lose your load or the canopy goes flying away. So that's a second way that you could attach onto one of your stakes. But to attach onto a stake the way I do it is always down and dirty. And I usually just use there, and then, you guessed it, 3 half hitches. And that's not even proper 3 half hitches. I just throw 3 big old knots on there and cinch them on down. And it generally will hold. You know, there's so many weird twists in there. I just do it however I want to, because I was never a Boy Scout, and you don't need to be either. You know, just know the knots that work for you, that help you out, that get you through your camp chores or basic stuff, loading up the back of the truck or cinching things down on top of the vehicle. You know, if you're going to be using rope, you got to know how to tie things down and cinch them down and tie them up so they're not going to come undone. So it's good to know knots. You just don't need to be a knot expert.